Serious, what terrifying confession has someone told you while intoxicated? Was chilling with an older dude with whom I recently started working as a butcher in a grocery store. A couple of beers down and he starts telling me he's been in prison for 17 years. Came out 2 years ago and it's his first ever job at 64 years old. I got curious and asked him what happened if it wasn't too private. Without hesitation, he simply answered, "I cut him down with an axe, this piece of shit. And now he's a butcher. Dude must really like his job, I guess, LMAO. Had a former friend tell me he killed his brother. Didn't help, this was while we were trying to herd his drunk ass to the car as he was crying and yelling it at the top of his lungs. Amazing we didn't end up in cuffs or the very least get stopped and questioned. Come to find out his brother died of a brain aneurysm and that morning he prayed for something to happen to get him out of school that day. He always blamed himself for his brother's death and I get that to a degree. One time, an old acquaintance, F49, and I, M32, were drinking late into the night. She drank much faster than me, and before long randomly and drunkenly confessed to me the following. When her aging and sick mother, whom she despised and was a ton of unappreciated work to care for, was left in her care, she intentionally withheld certain medications and gave her too much of other ones, with the plan being to kill her off. It worked. She told her other siblings that the illness must have finally gotten to her and she passed in her sleep. Since she was already old and sick, there was no autopsy. A minute later she snapped out of it and apologized profusely for telling me that, adding that I am the only person she has ever told. My mom told me she wished she aborted me when I was 8 or 9 or so. She's doing better now after a long struggle with alcoholism. Our relationship is much better, and when I told her this a few months ago she hugged me tightly and keeps apologizing to this day. Edit. Thank you so much for the awards. And everyone who relates, I hope you will find peace and love wherever you may go. Not brutal or anything, but my mom admitted to breaking confidentiality to find my dad's birth parents despite him pleading not to. She laughed about it and thought it was the funniest thing about how mad my dad was. That was the day I realized my mom doesn't care about others. Ages back I was helping a blackout drunk coworker to his apartment, etc. He was needing to be carried 1 second and sprinting across the parking lot the next. As we're getting close to his room he starts breaking down. Why did I hit him? I shouldn't have run, etc. Turns out drunk Diego is pretty convinced he hit a kid with his car one day. Sober Diego has no idea what he was talking about. My brother was drunk and he told me how he got sexually assaulted by our half-brother when he was 8. And that he knew that our half-brother assaulted me too when I was 5. I hadn't ever told my brother about my situation, so I was in shock. My uncle said that my grandfather wasn't exactly a caring, loving father because of working in the coal mines. He said my pap was terrified every day because he didn't know if he was coming home or not, cause he'd hear the mountains above him crack. Hanging out with a couple of former roommates 20 or so years ago. One of them mentioned he found young people attractive. Then clarified saying very young. Also never once hung out again. My grandpa never talked about his Korean War service. He had severe PTSD though. Would wake up in the middle of the night screaming. Then one night he came home absolutely shit-faced, laid down on the couch, then told me that his entire unit had been wiped out before his eyes. He was the sole survivor and got caught behind enemy lines but made it out. He was their sergeant and blamed himself. He eventually got into veterans therapy in his 60s though. Gay man dying of AIDS said I could charge my entire bar tab to his credit card cause he was going to die soon. Edit. It was me and a few friends watching football, so our tab was probably plus $200, but I was talking to him for a while before he said this. Think he was lonely and scared. So we just watched football with him for the rest of the afternoon. Made him feel welcome and normal, at least for a while. Just wanted what the rest of us do. To not feel alone and that someone cares. I believe his name was Ron. Edit number 2. This was 2001. Coworker told me he killed a dude. The other guy had a bad reputation for being a violent asshole and made it pretty clear that only one of them would be leaving the room alive. My coworker decided that he would prefer to be the one who didn't die. He did turn himself in and spent some time in prison. I scolded a drunk girl because she was trying to shoot up in the bathroom of a strip club. At first, I was pissed because there was blood on the toilet seat. She started crying, and said, "It's not my fault. My dad's been shooting me up since I was 10. It was freaking sad and I felt horrible for yelling at her. Edit. Shoot up equals injecting drugs into her veins. I'm aware she could be lying, however, it could equally be true. In the strip club, you find a lot of fucked up women, with fucked up stories. Had it been anywhere else I wouldn't have believed her. I had a colleague tell me 20 drinks in she was not only suicidal, but that she had unsuppressed HIV and was knowingly transmitting it to partners she was sleeping with and not telling them because she didn't care about people. I'm an HIV case manager, so this was absolutely horrific for me. An old co-worker of mine told me about how him and his friends killed a guy in the 80s who raped one of their sisters. He wasn't even drunk. He said they pulled up to his trailer out in the desert, honked the horn, and when the guy came out, about 6 guys all opened fire on him. He said that way no one knew exactly who killed him. A friend of mine likes to drink a lot, but he knows he has a limit because when he goes over it he becomes very talkative. He also doesn't date at all, and for a long time we all wondered why. He's a good-looking guy, he's really nice, he's fun to be around, when he isn't drinking, anyway, never wants to date. Well, one time he got absolutely shit-faced and I found out why. It turns out that when we was a kid, he saw his aunt murder his uncle in cold blood. Ever since, he's been terrified of being alone with a woman and feels like he could never truly be safe around them. I drunkenly confessed to my aunt at Christmas about how unhappy I've been feeling for the last 2 years and that I've got a bit of a coke addiction. The phone call from my sister the next morning was awkward as hell to have. An old friend I grew up with ended up messing around with the wrong crowd for a good few years until they all fell out. 4 of them wearing balaclavas went to his door and stabbed him multiple times. When they left they forgot to shut the door and someone out walking the dog found him. After I found out about it a few weeks later, I was out drinking with some mates and a couple guys started talking utter rubbish about stuff until one of them said what him and his mates done to someone just weeks prior. Honesty shit myself when I put 2 and 2 together. We were talking about Al Franken and they said something along the lines of, all guys fondle girls when they are sleeping, I used to touch my sister all the time. You could have heard a pin drop. We're no longer friends. My uncle told me he was raped as a child by an older friend. Explains a lot of his problems. I had a friend who told me that his girlfriend dumped him because they got into a huge fight when they were drunk and she was convinced he threatened her with physical violence. He said he was saying things out of frustration like and all that, but he was sitting the whole time and she was the one that was yelling and screaming. Weird, but okay. A few weeks later, I meet him up for drinks and he is absolutely plastered. I walk him back to his place with one of his friends. As we're walking he starts crying and says that he fucked up and that he is a terrible person. We asked him to elaborate and he tells us that his ex left because he threw her into a mirror and then flipped a coffee table at her. She's okay, couple bruises, scrapes. Kept my distance after that. At a Christmas party all was going well until a middle-aged couple started having an intoxicated blazing row. This domestic occurred a few minutes short of midnight. The wife involved was not a co-worker, but her husband was. They were both very drunk. People intervened, with me escorting the husband into the cloakroom to cool off. Now I knew that this guy had a reputation as a cheating Tinder hustler and that he'd often brag about his extramarital conquests. I wasn't ready for him to confess that he had hepatitis and had tested HIV positive 6 months ago. But confess he did, sobbing that his wife was going to leave him, as if he was the victim. Too long did not read. Drunk married sleazebag confessed to sexual relations with multiple Tinder dates, knowing he had hepatitis and HIV. That their uncle made them help bury a body. My grandfather recalled his happy memories of visiting brothels in Algeria during the war. In front of my horrified grandmother who he was already married to at the time and clearly had never heard of it. He also bragged about shooting a dozen people during that time, with a smile on his face. His side was the one invading. Fucked up shit. Got way too drunk and ended up telling a mate of mine how severe my depression really was and that I think about suicide a lot. That wasn't a fun morning after. Edit. Wow, I wasn't expecting so big of a blow up. I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone commenting, whether it was just hoping for the best, any advice or just sharing their story showing that it can happen to anyone. You're all amazing human beings and I wish nothing but the best for all of you. If I was gay I would probably have raped you. A trainee co-worker of mine told me of his gang activities. He witnessed a man in debt getting forcefully injected with heroin. Edit. I need to add that this was in Germany, not in Brazil. Edit. Apparently I did injustice to Brazil. They have very friendly gangs. My dad told me while he was drunk that the reason him and my mom divorced is because she slept with his best friend, who is now my stepdad, and they have my brother. I nearly fucking fainted as I spent the last 20 years being lied to as I had no idea. I once had a friend tell me he used to kill cats as a child, like brutally skin him alive and dissection. His parents found out and sent him to therapy his whole childhood. As far as I know he never did anything bad after, but I still wonder to this day. He told me out of the blue when we were tripping balls on mushrooms. Said he never felt regret for it but knew it was wrong. He said his curiosity was stronger than guilt. Never hung out with him again, and his comments sent me into, I need to go home now, kind LF trip. Was out drinking with some colleagues at a conference. We'd been at a club dancing, and we were on the way back to the place we were staying. We were chatting about something, I think maybe guys not taking no for an answer, and one of the guys said, I maybe raped someone once. Worst part is the guy was one of a pair of identical twins and I'm not totally sure which one he was. Edit. This got a lot of upvotes. I took a look at my notes and it turns out that what he actually said was, I might have raped someone. It was about 7 years ago, but my drunk ass apparently wrote that down so I wouldn't forget. It's also got the name of the twin who I believed it to be, but I'm maybe 80–90% certain on that. My ex admitted, after we broke up, to a mutual friend that our son wasn't an accident. That she purposely baby-trapped me in the hopes to getting a marriage proposal. Our mutual friend told me and is no longer friends with my ex. When he was a teenager, he heard from someone that a neighbor girl had been teasing his dog. So he pretended to be nice to her dog one day, and lured it into a field. He placed it by its collar onto a metal stake so it couldn't get free and he slammed rocks into its head until it died. He laughed when he told me this. I had just married him a few weeks prior and I was horrified. Divorced now, 21 years later, when I kept realizing over and over that yes, he is a psychopath. Friend of mine was super drunk one night and I'm not sure how it started but, through tears, he told me about how as a child, in his home country, he and his friend were abducted, raped, and tortured by a group of men, before his friend was killed and dismembered in front of him. He then went on to tell me about how he had already gone back and hunted down and killed one of the men and was just waiting till he had enough money to go back and find the other two and kill him as well. Was terrifying at the time, being with my girlfriend of 5 years and being a few weeks away from proposing. She said, I'll never have kids with you because I don't want them coming out like spotted little freaks. I have vitiligo. A mom friend of mine was hanging out and we were drinking wine together. I babysat for her that day and we decided to have some wine when she got home. We definitely drank a little too much, as I slept in the toddler bed that night, and let's just say it was a good thing it had plastic sheets. She had 3 kids. She had the perfect nuclear family. Her husband travels for work, and she worked part-time for a local law firm doing documentation. She told me none of her kids are her husband's. They all belong to one partner at the law firm. They all have a very similar birthdays. Because 1 week a year she stays late with the partner to take care of shredding or something. And they fuck every day that week. A chick that I used to go out with and then just ghosted me one day, was blackout drunk and confessed that her lesbian friend sabotaged what we had because she was jealous. Playing Truth or Dare at a party with close friends. Our lesbian friend of 8 years chooses truth. Other friend asks her, jokingly, if she's ever sucked dick. Everyone's laughing, she isn't. She admits to being raped by her uncle for 4 years as a child. Friend who asked starts crying, he had no idea. None of us did. A guy the first used to hunt with once had too much to drink and ended up telling me he was a felon and had served time for kidnapping. Found out his wife had been buying his hunting licenses as felons cannot hunt or be in possession of firearms. My ex told me she killed a guy in a parking lot. She had just got done dealing heroin, I think she said, and the guy got in her car to rob her. And she stabbed him in the stomach with a butcher knife and shoved him out onto the road as she drove off. This was long before she and I got together. But she was absolutely insane, and looking back I wonder what the actual fuck I was thinking. My former partner to me a story from when she was in high school. She played sports and traveled around because of it. She said that one time they were in this school and had access to the home team's locker room. They went in the girls' locker room and found a locker that was not locked and rifled through the contents. She said that she found a textbook and opened to a page and she took a giant shit in the book, then closed it back up and put it back in the locker and locked the locker up. This was one of the first red flags that she told me while drunk. I mean, what the fuck? They burned their childhood home down accidentally on purpose. That he didn't ever want a daughter in case he fancied her. The amount of people who admit to cheating on their partner. Really made me rethink relationships a lot. After sex, this lady told me I reminded her of her son. Many years ago, a friend started telling me about how his mother was out with various boyfriends when he was young and he'd catch, torture and kill small animals. He confessed to not understanding why he was doing it, and that he would be overcome with guilt and throw up afterward. I slowly became more afraid for my safety as he talked. It was a conversation I'll never forget. Working with this guy, who's probably 15 years older than me. After some drinks, he tells me why he's a janitor. He's a smart dude, so I was kinda curious as well. He backed up out of his laneway, and a little girl came running across and he kills her. Complete mistake. This had happened in the early 80s. Due to this, his record, he can't do really anything. Really sad. My dad got drunk and told me, at age 12, in graphic detail about the 4 men he'd killed in Baghdad while deployed. Changed how I saw him for a while. Some guy told me the proper technique to roofie a drink without a girl noticing. I told the bouncer who threw him out, but I'll never know if he was serious or just fucking with me. One of my friends confessed that he once slept with his mom and sister. My roommate very drunkenly confessed to having a one-night stand with Haley Joel Osment.